Hello and welcome to this Friday's morning market briefing. We've got lots to talk about, but firstly, Pakistan carries out strikes on suspected militant bases in Iran, as well as that rich Nikki Haley donor says further support depends on New Hampshire vote. We've got lots to talk about on the charts. Also, with lots happening on the economic calendar, but we'll come to that near the end, so make sure you stay around till you see that. Before we get straight into it, make sure to subscribe. The first article to talk about, of course, is Pakistan. Now, Pakistan struck Iran yesterday during retaliatory strikes against a jihadist group. This follows Iran's own strikes on a similar militant group in Pakistan. Now, this is a kind of moment of escalation, really, within the Middle East, which, of course, has been plagued at the moment with a series of conflicts. First, we obviously saw Hamas's attack into Israel, where we did see over 1,000 civilians and soldiers massacred, along with over 200 hostages taken. And from that, we've now seen Israel, embark on a ground, air, and naval campaign and operation into the Gaza Strip. Obviously, as a result, causing many civilian casualties in the process. And from that, we've also seen a conflict spark in the Red Sea, with the Shia militant group funded by Iran called the Houthis now attacking merchant vessels since November in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden, with missiles and suicide drones being sent at these ships, which has brought many merchant vessel companies to now divert their trade route and shipping route basically around the Horn of Africa and to this and instead embark on the longer journey around South Africa rather than going through the usual Mediterranean and Red Sea route. And obviously this has caused a rise in insurance costs for these companies. It's also caused shipping times to increase, as well as affected inflation as a result, or at least it's expected to affect inflation as a result. And from this, we have seen the US and UK put their own warships in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden, where they did take out some of these suicide drones and missiles that were fired. But after the Houthis did fire these missiles and suicide drones at such warships, we did then see retaliatory strikes by the UK and US, with the US now carrying out its third strikes in Yemen, all targeting Houthi bases and military outposts. And ultimately, this is now another escalation or possible conflict which could arise within the Middle East, as we do worry of a broader regional conflict within the Middle East sparking as a result of all of these tiny, smaller kind of fights and clashes if they kind of spread into a much larger conflict, which obviously would have a massive detrimental effect on the region, but also on the global economy, with this already affecting inflation because of the Red Sea, and also could cause oil prices to skyrocket, as we did talk about in an article quite some time ago, that if a conflict within the region does kind of break out, and it's a large regional conflict, if this does shut down Saudi Arabia's kind of oil trade and oil exports, we could see oil's price per barrel raised to $150, which obviously would weigh on inflation greatly. And that's why it's so important to stay on top of these topics in relation to in relation to world tensions, whether that be in China, Ukraine, or in the Middle East, where it does seem to be very tense at the moment, is because these conflicts could always escalate and do affect inflation greatly anyway. And so understanding them is so important to understanding the economies as a whole. But yet, keep your eyes on this topic, with these strikes marking a further escalation to the region. Pakistan's foreign ministry reported that the strikes were highly coordinated and specifically targeted terrorist hideouts based in Iran, with 7 militants killed in the strikes. These strikes targeted the province of Sistan Baluchistan. I've probably mispronounced that, I'm very sorry, which has long been a base for separatist groups fighting an insurgency against Pakistan. Iran confirmed the strikes, with several missiles being launched on an Iranian border village, with Iran also reporting that whilst 9 foreign nationals had died, amongst them were 3 women and 4 children. Iran also condemned the attack by Pakistan, despite the strike being in response to Iran attacking Pakistan-based jihadi group on Tuesday. Pakistan recalled its ambassador from Iran following the strike, with Pakistan's Prime Minister also leaving the World Economic Forum early in Davos this week, where obviously many world leaders have gathered and visited in an effort to, discuss not only, the economies of the world, but also, different kind of issues around the world. And this offers, UN meetings, this offers an opportunity for certain newer prime ministers and presidents to voice their concerns or issues with, the current state of the world, let's say. And we've heard that with Argentina's, I think it's the president, most recent president, Javier Milei, which obviously has said many things that are very interesting to note as well, but we obviously can't cover that all today. Now, this escalation to the conflict heightens worries that a broader conflict is brewing. Iran's initial strikes was in response to a suicide bombing in the city of Kerman. Worries of a broader conflict throughout in the Middle East, through increasing, this is poorly worded, as a result of the Iran-backed militia group, the Houthis, attacking merchant vessels in the Red Sea and attacking US warships. And that's the key worry, as I've previously noted, is that all these kind of smaller conflicts do break out into a much larger one. I mean, we've already seen certain Iranian-funded groups in Syria, and Iraq also attacking US bases already, and this has caused worries that the US may get involved in these conflicts somehow. But ultimately, we haven't seen much of that just yet. But obviously, in Lebanon, we do have Hezbollah, which is placed just on the border with Israel. And the worry's always been that should Hezbollah invade Israel, could this then spread to another country, and even spread to a second country of Syria? And as a result, at that point, we're looking at a possible regional conflict, which is why it's so important to keep your eyes on this, as the smallest kind of acts and smallest escalations can, evolve into something much, much larger. So keep your eyes on these topics, very important indeed to know. Next article to talk about, though, is billionaire Nikki Haley's donor. Now, a key billionaire donor for Nikki Haley is restricting support until New Hampshire votes in their Republican primary. The co-founder of Home Depot, Ken Langon, said he was willing to provide Haley with a nice sum of money should she prove her success in New Hampshire's primary vote, saying he isn't willing to give her more money if she can't find traction. Now, this is very interesting to note, obviously, because we are coming off the back of Iowa's primaries, which happened this week, where we did kind of see a landslide victory for Donald Trump. And I think this was largely expected by the US and other nations which were looking at the Republican primary to see what candidates might be going ahead in the 2024 presidential election. Ultimately, though, Trump has remained the favourite for quite some time now, ever since really we did see him lose his presidential position in 2020. And this is largely because he's remained that strong kind of almost cult-like backing and following, which have been with him through his downturns and upturns. And ultimately, as we've looked at before, polls are clearly highlighting the lack of support that Biden does have, with many voters seeing Trump's management of the economy being better than the way Biden handled the economy. And overall, the vast majority of the public do seem to believe that Trump did handle kind of the USA and the US's government far better than the way Biden is currently handling it. And ultimately, many reasons could be noted for this, but largely it does seem that Biden is getting quite unlucky at the moment. Obviously, we're seeing the same thing in the UK with Rishi Sunak, where, of course, the great deal of global inflation has caused both of these leaders to kind of lose their approval ratings. We've really seen the same across the Western world with, chancellors like Olaf Scholz also seeing the same sort of issues with German inflation, causing many, obviously voters to lose favour with the leader. And ultimately, this is definitely going to weigh on Biden. Is those issues with the economy, whether that be his fault or not? And ultimately, it does seem like that Trump is the favourite. But Nikki Haley has kind of been the star and the dark horse coming out of the kind of shadows, where she did work as a UN ambassador, I believe, but the UN delegate, but ultimately is showing her worth in the primaries, as she has come out as a strong woman on foreign policy and a good understander of the way to be a more moderate Republican in the age of, the kind of more hardline Republicans and, the more anti-establishment Republicans that we've seen most recently. Now, Haley's campaign has recently focused on new attacks on Trump and Biden for their age. Initial donors of alternatives to Trump, however, are surprised by his strong grassroots fan base. These supporters, have remained strong despite criminal indictments against Trump, which we've obviously covered. Other donors, such as the big billionaire Steven Schwartzman, also said he would not support Trump's bid again and would be looking for alternatives. Trump dominated Monday's Iowa's caucuses, which marked the start of the Republican primaries, going on to win 51% of the vote, which is 30% above competition. Now, despite Haley's weak showing in the polls in Iowa, her kind of polls are now currently showing her closing the gap in New Hampshire, with, I believe, the current polls showing her above the 30% threshold for her to, enter these New Hampshire polls, which, is a strong showing kind of in comparison to how, strong the fan base of Trump obviously is. Now, Haley is gambling on New Hampshire, where she'll appeal to the more moderate voters and independents. So this will be very important to keep your eyes on as we do go into next week, and something to definitely keep on your mind and look out for. Obviously, understanding who will be the Republican nominee will weigh on who's most likely to win and who is likely to manage the economy in a certain way, and that will greatly affect, of course, US equities and other assets in relation to the dollar. So keep your eyes on all of that. Next to talk about, though, of course, is the chart, where we do have quite a bit to talk about. And to begin with, we are on the US indice, the US 30, which has been an interesting position recently, where we did see it end off the year of 2023 with a strong market rally following more dovish rhetoric from the Fed. And from that, we did see the US 30 make all-time highs, reaching levels around the 37,800 level, which is very significant, of course. And this line that I do have, this strong line that I do have marked out just there, does highlight the highest point of the US 30 previous to the levels that we're currently seeing. And ultimately, though, as we have started off the new year, we've really seen a slowdown in the momentum on the US 30, with a kind of range being formed as a result, where we have a strong area of resistance at the top and a strong area of support at the bottom, where price has kind of been bouncing to and from one another. And in yesterday's market briefing, I did note how price was currently sitting around this key liquidity zone, which price has reacted to before. And I did note how, it does seem that price is now forming a bit of a range, and I wouldn't be surprised to see price react to that zone in a bullish manner, and we would then see a continuation of this ranging motion that we have seen on the US 30. And it does seem that we are now seeing that take place, with the US 30 reacting in a very bullish manner from that liquidity zone, and now we're once again sitting in that middle of the range that we have seen price, kind of hover around for quite some time now. But obviously, as we do go into next week, news in relation to the Fed will be very important to kind of note, as this will be weighing on the way the US 30 will move. But that said, in the recent weeks starting off 2024, we haven't heard, we have heard quite a bit of data releases, but ultimately, despite the kind of significance of this data, it hasn't weighed or moved the US 30 too much. But definitely keep your eyes on the US 30. Very interesting position indeed. Next to talk about is the dollar, which was also seeing a bit of a ranging motion most recently as we have started off the new year, similar to where the US 30 was at. However, following certain news most recently in regards to the ECB and in regards to the Bank of England, we have now seen the dollar kind of push to the upside, breaking out of that usual range that we do see, and ultimately making a name for itself, breaking once again out of that range that it was sitting in. This is largely because of the more hawkish data and news that we've received recently, which has allowed for more kind of bullish perspectives on the dollar to come back in, where rates are expected to be raised later on than previously expected, and that's why we've seen this push to the upside. But ultimately, at the moment, we are kind of consolidating out and not making a significant move to the upside or downside. Keep your eyes on the dollar though. Staying on the top of the dollar is Euro USD, which mirroring the dollar, of course, is kind of sitting in an interesting position where it is consolidating. Obviously, price has now reacted to that 38.20, which we did mark out yesterday, but we haven't seen too much sell-off potential from that area. We have now seen a kind of short-term double bottom be formed from moving off that 38.20. It'll be interesting to see how price now does move, where it could go. But we are having another ECB President Lagarde speech today. Maybe that will affect it, but I think earlier the speech that she did earlier this week that we did comment on was far more significant than any of them that she'll do on the later half of the week. So how much we'll see happen today on the euro, not too much, I don't think, but keep your eyes on Euro USD anyway. Pound yen is an interesting one to talk about though, because we are now reaching all-time highs once again. Obviously, following certain volatility triggered by the Bank of Japan, we did see a crazy sell-off from its all-time highs most recently, and we did see that kind of happen at the start of December last year. Since then, we formed a range, and starting the new year, we have now seen a significant wave of bullish momentum come back into the pound, as we have seen price kind of push to the upside. And this is largely as a result of some more hawkish data that we've recently received in regards to the pound, largely driven by data referencing UK inflation still being too hot to handle, and then ultimately that meaning that rates will have to stay higher for longer. We've seen this across the board really, but the pound especially, with inflation raising most recently in November, or was it December, sorry, but ultimately the most recent inflation data did represent an increase in inflation. So definitely keep your eyes on pound yen, as we are currently sitting at those all-time highs, and therefore in that key liquidity and resistance zone, which is of course so important to keep your eyes on, as we would be seeing bearish momentum really from that area. Keep your eyes on that. Next to talk about though is Bitcoin, which is an interesting position because it has now broken below the range that it was sitting in. We were kind of expecting price to just stay around that area, but ultimately we are continuing to the downside. Price may now interact with this area of liquidity just below it, which it does seem to be reacting to, but keep your eyes on Bitcoin. An interesting zone nonetheless, but ultimately it's going to be hard to kind of judge where Bitcoin could go at the moment, as ultimately the more fundamental data that we've received has just not lined up with the charts, where it does seem that kind of market participants already had priced in the SEC approving of Bitcoin ETFs, and as a result, when they were approved, price was already overbought anyway, and as a result that bearish divergence did come true, and we have seen a significant sell-off to the downside now as a result. But we are now forming a kind of bullish divergence, so maybe keep your eyes on that as we do sit around this key liquidity zone. Next to talk about though is gold. Which, not too much to say on it apart from the fact that we did find some bullish momentum yesterday and price has now moved up from that. Keep your eyes on gold, as these kind of world tensions news is heavily influencing the charts, especially for gold, which of course is a safe haven asset, so largely depends and is influenced by these world tensions related events and global affairs. So definitely keep your eyes on all of that. Next to talk about though, and lastly to talk about, is oil, which is in a very interesting position sitting on that liquidity zone still, but ultimately not too much to say apart from the fact that we are still around that level. Keep your eyes on oil. That's all to talk about on the chart. So lastly to talk about, of course, is the economic calendar, where we don't have too much data coming out today. Firstly, we will be getting British retail sales data. Next, we'll be having the ECB President Lagarde speaking once again in another speech. Spanish consumer confidence is also a figure that we'll be receiving today, along with Canadian retail sales data, important to note in regards to inflation. And then we'll be getting the US's consumer sentiment figure, along with numerous Fed officials speaking today in their own speeches. So lots to listen out for, lots to look out for. We've covered lots in the articles, lots in the charts, and lots in the economic calendar. That's all from us at Wildwood Capital. Have a great one. See you later. Bye.